Greetings. It's wonderful to have all of you with us, and we are grateful to have Rita Berglund with us. And she's going to be walking us through ways to talk about boundaries and trust and fear during times of COVID, building resiliency, and how to deal with new normal engagements around safety measures, as well as following those safety measures. So we are grateful to have the wisdom and just gentle wisdom and strength that Rita brings to these conversations. And so Rita, we are grateful to have you. If you would begin by introducing yourself, and then we will take it from there.
Thank you so much, Morgan. It really is a privilege to be with all of you. I reach out with open heart to all my Calvary family and friends. I know it's been a long time since I've been with some of you, and some of you are new to me. So it is a real privilege to be with you. I am a psychotherapist in private practice down in Centennial off I-25 and Arapahoe Road, so not far from Calvary. During this COVID crisis, of course, I've been seeing clients through digital formats such as this, and recently have also, under new physical distancing rules, have started to see a few clients in my office as well. It has been an interesting time of some deep waters with some big losses and deep grief, but also some really sweet, treasured moments of love and connection. So it's I'm on the journey with all of you.
Thank you so much, Rita. And if you would like to begin, you can share your screen and begin helping us think through some of these things.
So one of the things Morgan asked me to talk about was boundaries and how we're navigating boundaries through this time, especially when we're getting so many mixed messages from the media. We're getting mixed messages sometimes from our families and our partners. So it's a new world, and we are developing skills as we go. One of the things that, and now my screen isn't letting, oh, there we go. One of the things that came to me during our work with our son and our own children was to realize that good boundaries are about good contact. If we're practicing good boundaries, we experience good contact. So I love this image. This is actually my father-in-law, Howard, who was 94, I think, when this photo was taken, and my grandson, Quinn, who was 6 months. And if you imagine, there's a bubble around each of them. And those bubbles, as they meet, they create what we call the contact boundary. So there are two people here having their own complete experiences, and at the same time being completely present to each other. So I know I have good boundaries when someone can fully show up to me with all of who they are, and I can show up fully to them with all of who I am. Sometimes we lose that contact boundary, and we suddenly feel like others are merging with us, or we're merging with others, and everything starts to feel too close. We start to feel like there's these assumptions that start to come up about what the other person's feeling or might be experiencing. And often in those situations, we tend to de-self ourselves. It's like, since you're sad, I can't share that I'm happy. Or if I'm happy, you can't share that you're sad. And part of the work we do with boundaries is how to share differences in such a way that we can, again, not lose ourselves and feel like we're just an appendage on some exotic experience here, as you see in the photo. Of course, the opposite of that is sometimes our boundaries evolve into walls. And people sometimes confuse walls with boundaries. No is important. It's important for me to be able to say no, but sometimes what I'm saying no to is contact, in which case I'm putting up a wall. And sometimes walls are appropriate. And sometimes walls can also cause us to feel abandoned. So rather than engulfed or emerged with other people, I can feel too separated and too apart. And of course, we experience this in our families, particularly when there's conflict. And a lot of us grow up with the great Disney love stories, Hollywood, that if you loved me, you would just know what I need. And of course, this gets us into great trouble. And most of you can probably have your own stories about this. When we are born, of course, and Morgan, many of us are very happy about little Julian joining their family. When they're babies, of course, they don't have language. They can't tell us what we need. So we have to use the best of our intuition and our attunement skills to figure it out. And sometimes we just need to experiment until we get the response of them being comforted. Often, because that was our initial love experience, we expect that even as adults from the people who we consider our love partners in the world, our spouses, our children. And when that doesn't work so well, we run into major problems. So sometimes when this communication is breaking down, we begin to tell ourselves stories about the other person's behavior that are not based in the reality of that other person. And we get stuck in our own inner stories. I don't know if you can see it in this illustration, but the gentleman in the image is saying, she thinks I'm incompetent. And the woman is saying, he just wants to get his way. And of course, we have no idea what either of them are referring to or what has caused them to get stuck in the conflict. So sometimes it's good to step away and examine, what is the story I am telling myself about the people in my life, the friends who I don't think are showing up, the family who I don't think are showing up, those who are being too demanding, and to examine, are these stories a part of past hurts? And how do I then check these stories out with the other person? Can I imagine creating a new story with my loved ones? I thought we needed a moment for a smile, because in the midst of conflict, sometimes humor comes up. Sometimes the way we change the tension or the stuck places is we can step back and kind of get some perspective on ourselves. So I love this quote: no matter how calmly you try to referee, parenting will eventually produce bizarre behavior. And I'm not talking about the kids. Their behavior is always normal. And again, we all have moments when our fears and our unmet needs can either bring laughter or can create great pain. Many of our struggles then are based in unresolved past hurts or past successes. So again, thinking, what is it I really need to feel that I'm emotionally safe? How do I feel skillful? What are the resources I use to be connected? How do I experience contact with others? Whether that's with touch or today with no touch. I'm going to back up. Any questions at this point, Morgan? Or clarifications?
Sure. I think one of the things that I often hear is, how do I practice communicating through unhealthy or difficult boundaries? How do we begin practicing those conversations? Because if there already is a strain in that boundary or a difficulty, it can feel like I'd rather just coast through than try to engage differently, because what if I just make it worse? at least with what it is, I know how to cope, or I know how to continue. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So changing communication patterns is difficult because we all have these narratives we get stuck in our families. You know, the fight that, oh, here it comes again. I know exactly what my partner's going to say. He knows exactly what I'm going to say. And we're going to go around the merry-go-round once more, having a conflict about this or that issue. I think the first thing is always to become aware of the patterns. Where is it that these patterns show up? And how is it that they get us stuck? Because they're usually loaded with lots of emotion. And whether it's patterns of communicating with my kids or my partner or my parents or my friends, we all have them. So sometimes I think once we become aware of them, we can actually work preemptively. So how can I talk to my pattern about these, my partner or my loved one about these patterns without just recreating them? How can I say, hey, I notice we keep getting stuck in the same pattern. We keep having this same conversation. What do you think it would look like if we maybe did this differently? Maybe if we did something in writing. Maybe if we got a friend to sort of coach us through it, or someone who's in a professional position. Let's get some professional coaching from a counselor. Those kinds of resources can be helpful. There are also great resources, and I'll touch on a couple as we go forward. And now is, I think, a great time to look them up, where because we're stuck at home together, we can read books together on marriage, we can read books together on parenting, or listen to audios or watch videos. There's some amazing resources out there. My little caveat, however, is everybody should watch it all together at the same time. Like if you're reading a parenting or let's say reading a book on marriage, you should read it out loud with your partner or listen to it out loud with your partner. Otherwise, information can become a weapon, right? You should read this book, and if you did, you would stop doing that. You know, this book becomes some outside expert that I can use to triangulate against you as the bad, unskillful person in the relationship. So I think it's better if we can look at resources together and then discuss. Do you like what this author is saying? Do you not like it? Do you agree, not agree? With parenting stuff, I actually even encourage including the kids if they're old enough. Love and Logic has some good resources. The Whole Brain Child, there's some really cool stuff out there. But I love when a family will like listen to a parenting talk together and then discuss it. What do you think about their idea of this is how we should be raising you? Or that we should use this to get you to clean your room. We should use this approach. And really bring the kids into a collaborative space around how we work as a family. And again, that tends to increase this contact, right? I start to respect every person's bubble of experience and individuality, rather than expecting them to be just like me, or just like so-and-so, or, right? And then we end up with walls instead of contact. We end up with power struggles instead of collaboration. So yeah, I'm all about let's get everyone resourced and creative, because there's no perfect books out there, perfect resources. And I'm sure Morgan has some brilliant ones in her list as well.
We're learning more and more. We joked that there's no book on parenting in a pandemic. So we also have to be, as you noted, very creative if we're looking at a resource, and acknowledging that just because they have expertise doesn't mean they know us as experts. And so I really appreciate you noting that it's a jumping off point or a unifying point on information that then can be brought to the family or group of individuals to navigate for what works best for them. But I think sometimes, to your point, Rita, of having outside information, it can be incredibly helpful, because then that's a third party that can be either, oh, we completely disagree with this person, and we have unity around that disagreement of that is not the approach that works for us, or going, oh, that puts a whole new perspective on it. Can we talk about that more? And I think that alone can give a helpful creation of space to then re-engage and create connectivity. So I appreciate those pieces of wisdom that you offered.
I love the word experiment, because every family is unique. And even as I work with couples or families in my office, I will put out stuff as an experiment. Try this. It might be a fit, it might not be a fit, because we're all unique. And we never fully know each other. We're full of mystery. We never fully know ourselves. So if I can stay open and willing to experiment, well, let's try this for a few weeks and see how it goes. And then the whole family can, you know, discuss whether it's a fit or not, and whether to continue it or create some new next experiment of their own. So yeah, I'm so excited about the resources, especially in the last 10 years that have come out. So some of them I've distilled here into just a few sort of bullet points around good, healthy communication, and also not so good communication. So a lot of us struggle with, I ask for what I need and my needs aren't met. This is something I think we've all heard often. So we ask the question, how do I ask for what I need in a way that sets you up to be successful and able to respond clearly and carefully? Part of my screen's covered up, so I might be missing things here. So of course, going back to that idea of good boundaries and good contact. If something's really important to me, I want to make contact first before I communicate it. I want to make sure I see your eyes. You know, whether it's with my partner or my grandkids or my kids, it's like, can I see those eyes? My grandkids will tell you I say that when I really want to make sure they're going to get a piece of communication. Can I see your eyes, babe? So I make contact first, so they know that what I'm going to say is important. It shows that I believe that what I'm saying is worthy of being heard. Communication always begins with the person who is speaking. We often can attack others for not listening. And I think we need to unlearn that tendency and really go back to, well, maybe I didn't communicate it in a way that you could hear it. So how do I come back and reevaluate how I'm communicating in the first place? How can I set you up to be successful in listening? Because we can certainly set others up to be successful in not listening. Whether I'm yelling at them as they go out the door, or trying to talk to them while they're watching TV or they're on their ever-present device. That's a sure way to sabotage any success. So I always want to make sure I have contact first. I have something that's really important to me that I want you to hear. Is this good time for you to hear it? And we can check that out in the moment. The next thing we tend to do is we tend to get really general really quick. So I might say something like, I want you to clean your room. I'm so sick and tired of what a disaster your room is, right? And now you're starting to feel, not only am I angry, and I have this expectation, and you're going, okay, you know, I'll clean my room or whatever. But then you're back to your game, and the room doesn't get cleaned. So as an example, if we break that down to be more specific, I might say, as a part of this family, I need you to spend some time cleaning your room. when would be a good time for you to do that? And we might make an appointment. Would you like me in the room when you clean it, or would you like me outside the room when you clean it? We might negotiate that. We might negotiate a time period. Like a lot of kids get overwhelmed when they hear, would you clean your room? And they can freeze up. They feel flooded, they feel overwhelmed. But if we sort of tier things so we set them up to be successful, like with young children, we often start with like the number of things. Like with my grandkids, it was like, you need to they're at age 4, you need to pick up 4 things. At age 7, you need to make your bed and pick up 7 things, you know, or you need to find 8 pieces of dirty laundry, whatever it is. We can make it fun. And we also tend to make it shorter for younger kids, and they can build up to longer time periods. So a lot of times when my kids were little, we would put on a song and everyone would run and see how much we could clean up until the song ended. Or we would do a 10-minute tidy. We'd set the timer and just do it for 10 minutes. We have found that this can actually work really well for couples and adults as well. It's like, if I tell my partner, oh, I really want to snuggle, I really need to talk to you tonight, and my partner is exhausted and overwhelmed, and they're thinking inside of themselves, oh no, this is going to be a 4-hour drama, I probably won't get a real warm reception. But if I go, hey, I really need to share some things with you tonight, and I need about 20 minutes and some snuggle while I share it, what time would that work for you? Chances are more likely, again, that my partner will meet that need. Or maybe I need distance. Hey, I have a favorite show I want to watch tonight, but I don't want you to feel abandoned. So is it okay if I disappear between 7 and 8, and then I'll check back in with you at 8 o'clock? When we get specific like this and use time frames, we're much more likely to set the other person up to be successful. The other thing that's happening is I'm not making it personal, right? The reason I want to watch my favorite show isn't because I'm avoiding you. Or the reason I want to have 20 minutes of snuggle and or discussion isn't because I think that I'm not getting enough attention from you, right? We can start to let go of those inner stories and stuck places just by getting much more direct about what our needs are. And again, this is all an experiment. Sometimes I ask my partner for 20 minutes of focused us time, and then when it's over in 20 minutes, I'm going, you know, that really wasn't a fit. You know, so I think tomorrow night, maybe I'll ask for a 20-minute walk, or, you know, 20 minutes of arm wrestling or a pillow fight. We can get creative then. So rather than it being all win or all lose, every experience becomes a piece of data, and we can get better at figuring out what we need and how I can set the other person up to be successful in meeting those needs. One of the things, I've been negotiating some Zoom relationships for some folks, and we've learned to set a timer, because sometimes in families in particular, someone will dominate the entire Zoom conversation. So we start setting up a timer for each person to share, or something similar. So getting creative. Another thing that's happened, of course, is we're all getting bored of our own stories as well as everybody else's stories. It's like, oh, we've heard that one. So there are some great resources, back to resources, Morgan, of these conversation starting questions. Every youth leader loves these that I know of. We put them under everybody's plates at Thanksgiving. Just really creative questions to find new ways of interacting with each other. There's table talk cards. If you go to Amazon or Google and Google conversation starting cards, you'll come up with a variety of choices. And some of them are really focused too, about from sports to humor. So that's a great resource as well. So experimenting, using the data, having positive follow through. How did that work for you? How did that work for me? Do we want to try that again? How would we do it differently next time? Because in family, especially as well as friends, we want to have do-overs, because I guarantee you some things won't go well. The other thing, this is a piece that comes from a big study of couples in Seattle, Washington. And some of you are familiar with this study by John Gottman and Nancy Silverman, who are sort of the figureheads of the study. They've been studying relationships now, and particularly in marriages, for over 20 years, and the data they've collected is phenomenal. And one of the things that's come out of that data is the success and failure of relationships really boils down to skills and patterns. And what are the skills that help marriages and relationships to thrive? What are the skills that destroy relationships and marriages? And one of the most poignant things that came out of that analysis was what they call the 4 horsemen of the relational apocalypse. So along with the things I hope you'll practice and experiment, these are the things I want you to avoid. Number 1, of course, is criticism. Verbally attacking other people's personality or character. And we all hate being criticized. It's always cutting. It's rarely ever helpful. I'm one of those people who, I don't think there's such a thing as constructive criticism. I think there's helpful feedback, and I love helpful feedback. I don't like criticism because it always feels very personal and demeaning in some way. So the second one, contempt, this is one of the most strong predictors of divorce. It's when you'll see one person attack another person's sense of self. They're insulting, they're psychologically abusing, name calling, put downs, humiliating, shaming, all of those kinds of behaviors where we're really treating the other person as an object that is not worthy of any love or attention. You treat them with contempt. Again, be really mindful and make sure this is not something you're doing. The next one was really hard for me, defensiveness, because this is where I go when I don't feel safe. I want to defend myself. Of course, the problem is then it makes it hard for me to own what does belong to me, and it makes it hard for me to listen to the other person. And of course, defensiveness and criticism tend to get hooked up. One person starts criticizing, the other person starts defending, and communication breaks down very, very quickly. Stonewalling is the 4th one, and this kind of refers back to the throwing up walls that prevent contact, where we withdraw from the relationship. We do the silent treatment. We walk around in a way that conveys disapproval. We create distance and separation. We threaten abandonment. All of these kinds of behaviors, which really put up a wall so that there can't be any sort of repair or reconciliation. Any questions after all that download, Morgan?
I think more if there's, so we also realize that this doesn't just translate to partnered relationships or parent-child relationships, but friends as well. And I think sometimes when we're trying to figure out how to improve friendships and dynamics, especially in times like these where we can't see each other in the same way, or we're not in shared space the way maybe a partner or parent-child might be. Can you speak to how maybe friends can have these conversations, using an example of friends that maybe miss having conversation, but because the other friend has other commitments, they don't necessarily want to hop on a FaceTime or on the phone again. And yet we can still articulate what our needs are using the screen that you have up right now, which is specificity and setting people up for success. Can you just give one example of how maybe friends who don't live in the same space could have this type of engagement?
So I can think of a lot of examples. I think one of the things I'm always mindful of is sometimes I don't ask because I think the other person is too busy, or I'm not important enough to the other person. So I always want to check in with myself first. And to really explore too, will I be okay if this person says no? What will I be okay if this person says, I'd love to, but things are so crazy right now, I just can't do it. And I think once we sort of gather that information about ourselves, then we can put out the bid for contact, I'll call it that. I reach out for some interaction. And if we, so let me see. Okay, what I think I would do, say I'm gonna call my friend Janet, who lives in another state, and I'm really missing her. We had plans to be together, and that trip got canceled, and I'm really grieving it. So how do I create contact? Well, first of all, I call her, or I text her, or email, whatever that friend is most comfortable with, and I say, man, I miss you so much. And I really want a Zoom happy hour with you. Or I want to just go for a walk and have you on my phone. Would there be time when that would work for you in the next 2 weeks? And I'm just looking for an hour. And then my friend might say, the Zoom thing wouldn't work. My eyes are so blurry at looking at computers by the end of the day, but I'd love to go for a walk on my phone with you. But I can't do a whole hour. I can do 45 minutes tomorrow at 7. Do you see how this is going? And then we can sort of negotiate back and forth something that will create success in having at least some kind of contact together. And I know this is happening with like grandparents and grandkids. They're trying to come up with other ways of connecting that aren't so limited by a screen, perhaps. Some of them are reading children's stories every night. Some of them are going back to old-fashioned letter writing, which is wonderful. I don't know who doesn't love receiving a card or letter in the mail. I think I've sent more cards in the last month than I have in several years. So I think getting creative too and trying stuff, what lands in people's souls that feels nurturing. And if a Zoom experience doesn't feel nurturing, or FaceTime, maybe a letter, maybe, a walk with my headphones and my telephone, maybe a backyard distant. We've been having some people in our backyard, and they bring their chairs, and, we do the mandatory 6 feet apart. I know people who meet in parks, and again, they do the distancing. They bring their own chairs and their own little snacks. And so I think there's all kinds of ways we can experiment to see what's going to meet that need. I think the other thing that's important is not taking it personally when somebody's not available, and also making sure you have more than one person in your life. And I'll touch again on that later, Morgan, but we really need a team of 4 or 5 people so that when one person isn't available, I have another friend I can reach out to, or another family member. This was something actually Brad and I did when our son was diagnosed with cancer. We each got a support team of 5. And even our little daughter, Brianna, at age 4, had a list of phone numbers in her pocket in case mom and dad weren't really available to talk to. She had somebody she could call. So it's something I've advocated with my clients as well, that you really need to have this intentional support system so that when one person isn't available, I don't need to take it personally because, oh, I can call this person. And usually, you know, and my little circle team still exists from when my son was diagnosed, which is amazing. There's a group of 7 of us that have met together over 20 years now.
Wow.
And so I also don't feel guilty then, right? If one of them calls me and says, hey, I really want to get together, and I'm like, I'd love to, but you know, the water's too deep right now. I don't have the bandwidth for it. You know, she can go, okay, I love you. I'll catch you on the next round. I'm going to go call Christy. And I think that can give us a lot of freedom to say no without any guilt as well, because we know the other person has other people they can call. I'm not their only support system.
That's great. Thank you, Rita.
This has been a time of amazing loneliness and solitude for so many folks. I have a number of clients who have no family and are isolated completely because of health concerns. The only person they may see occasionally is the person who delivers their groceries or their Meals on Wheels. So when that happens, of course, then we're sort of faced with, how am I in relationship with myself? I don't have another person in the house. I don't have anyone to talk to about my day. I'm tired of the TV. So I think this has created an invitation for people to change how we relate to ourselves, how we are in partnership with ourselves. One of my favorite poets and authors is David White, who wrote a book, The 3 Marriages. And one of the things that shocked me about that book is the 3rd section of the book. The first 2 marriages he talks about are our marriage to work, whatever that looks like, whatever we do for a living, our marriage to another partner, and what that looks like. The 3rd one is our marriage to ourself. And I kind of went, what? And he's like, yeah, how are you a good wife to yourself? How are you a good husband to yourself? And he said, this is the hardest marriage, is looking at how it is I treat myself. Do I treat myself like a loving partner? Do I treat myself like a loving friend? Or do I treat myself like someone who is angry and shaming and using all of those negative relationship things, self-critical? Do I, you know, throw all this criticism on myself? Do I cover myself with shame and guilt? Do I constantly feel unwanted, rejected, unworthy? We can end up creating this whole cesspool of negativity in how we are or are not relating to ourselves. So I think looking at that as a place of transformation. There are people who are amazing at solitude. They can spend great deals of time in solitude and come out super healthy. They could go into, you know, what is it in prison they call the punishment where you're put in isolation.
Solitary confinement.
Solitary confinement, yes. And come out mentally ill, or they can come out quite healthy. And a lot of the studies look at how they are in relationship with themselves. There's some great stories around Nelson Mandela's time in prison and how he nurtured that healthy relationship with himself. so that when he came out of prison, he was healthy and grounded and could go on to lead South Africa. Part of that too is cultivating a sense of belonging and realizing even though I may be alone, I'm still in solidarity with an entire planet. When I feel alone, when I feel isolated, at some level, it's an illusion because everything vibrates together on the planet. You know, I'm still surrounded by the divine, inside and outside. So there are some wonderful meditations that can help a person get back in touch with belonging and solidarity, even when I can't be physically present to others or they can't be physically present to me. We've been doing some things therapeutically with things like weighted blankets or, you know, kind of cuddling ourselves so we get at least some physical sensations that way of being held. Massages are a great resource, and many places have started under really restricted ways of being safe can give you a really great massage. Moving the body, walking, all of those things can help us in relating to ourselves, nurturing ourselves with food, being mindful around how we're eating, being mindful of what I'm filling my brain with in terms of books or the media. And all of those things are like, I'm doing what a good friend would do for me. A good friend would say, don't watch that TV program, watch this one. Because this one is going to help you to be more grounded in reality, or will make you smile or laugh. I know some people have completely sworn off watching the news because it seems to be, again, stuck in a narrative and a story that is not very helpful all the time. So how do we look at connecting in that way? Some people have chosen to foster animals. Some who may listen to this may know Carl Schneider. He was a young man who grew up at Calvary. He decided during quarantine to become a foster parent to a dog. And of course, after 2 months, the dog is now becoming permanently Carl's. But animals are also a great source of companionship during a time like this. And again, you can be a foster caregiver and not necessarily be committed to keeping a pet forever. And I think all of these things also speak to how we have this inborn need to love others. You know, loneliness is an indication that I have love to give that I'm not giving somewhere. So if I'm lonely, I often ask myself that question. Who out there could I give some love to? And there are ways of connecting up with other people, even strangers, whether it's in a book club or a Bible study or a prayer meeting, taking the risk of figuring out the technology, taking the risk of meeting new people, even in quarantine. I know people have met neighbors because now they're playing music across the back fence or across their balconies. So even under quarantine, we can meet new people, and as well as become a better friend to ourselves, we can extend that friendship to others. Does some of that fit, Morgan?
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciated the comment that loneliness is an aspect of us having love to give that we can't give. And I think that's definitely part of, especially not just the Calvary community, but collectively, whether it's family, friends, folks we may have visited if we live in a neighborhood or residential assisted living center where we'd go and visit somebody just to ensure that they knew they were seen and heard and thought of. And when we can't do that, that loneliness can manifest. And that's very helpful because it also gives us, as you were saying earlier, whether it's a card or different creative ways of making that contact, right? That loneliness can be a avenue for figuring out who am I missing being able to love and express love to, or and then the marriage to self, I think, is also really helpful language. I'm somebody who sees things visually, and so when I think of, like, am I a spouse to myself and am I a good one, like, that brings up a whole nother set of questions and, and thoughts. But it is helpful because you don't have to be married to have that understanding. And while that language is a partnered language, it's really like, how do we also understand ourselves as created in the divine, and how do we honor that? And how do we navigate just the feelings that we might be having? Because sometimes, just as, we were talking earlier about miscommunication with family, friends, partner, sometimes we don't like the feelings we're having. And so then we have internal dialogue around how we're feeling or experiencing, and that can produce guilt and shame. And thus we sever that connection with self as well. And so that's just a really helpful image to be able to also have different talking points with yourself around, how am I doing and how am I nurturing that? Knowing that that can sustain depending on how long these safety measures continue. And if we, have to go backwards in safety measures, being more restrictive than we are right now, and going back to sheltering at home and feeling like, oh my goodness, I can't even go socially distance visit somebody, it allows all of us, whether we live with folks or not, to be able to continue to work on how we are, so that we then know how we relate to others. So those were really helpful nuggets for me to also ponder and think through, because it matters, right? You can even be surrounded by people and feel isolated. It's not a matter of physical connection as much as it is an internal connection with self and other.
I think that, when we were talking about having love, loneliness is a sign that we have love to give, that we're not giving. One of my favorite stories during this time of COVID, someone passed away and gave their church a very significant endowment. And the church decided to actually divide it among all the members of the congregation to give away.
Wow.
And to anonymously find somebody to give a portion of this endowment to, find out somebody who'd lost a job, or somebody who was in need, or somebody who was lonely. And the stories that have come back have been amazing. And I think some other people sort of caught the movement of that and have become like secret Santas. And they're just randomly, will drop off food at a neighbor's house with a note, or, will randomly leave a card in somebody's mailbox that they don't even know. Just as a way of that practice of being of service and feeling like I still make a difference in the world. My life still matters. Even if I can't leave my house, how can I make my life matter to someone else? And then, of course, there's all kinds of avenues for doing that. But I think we feel differently when we, even if it's anonymously, we've reached out and touched somebody's life. Reminded somebody that they're beautiful, that they're loved, that they matter. So that's been a really cool thing to see happening.
Yeah.
Of course, part of this journey of giving and receiving is really being mindful of our expectations, because our expectations and reality sometimes are very, very far apart. And when that happens, we create suffering, the distance between my expectations and my reality. So I also have to be aware when I'm being upset or angry or disappointed because others aren't meeting my expectations. And then, of course, I go to those negative communication patterns like being critical or judgmental. So the invitation is always to how can I let go of my expectations or create expectations that are more reasonable and really ground myself in reality, both my own reality and the reality of the other person. Like when I'm requesting something about my needs, am I being realistic? Of course, when we create suffering and we start stewing in it, we often end up transmitting it to others. So that's why it's a good practice, first of all, to become aware of our pain and then see how we might transform it. And this is sort of the fundamental of all spiritual practice. How do I heal and transform my pain and suffering so that I don't transmit it to others? When I do that and I stand in mindfulness, and some of you are familiar with this term, mindfulness, awareness, is to have a balanced acceptance of my present experience, right? Letting go of my expectations, being really present in the moment. And it's not more complicated than that. Then I can open to receiving the present moment, pleasant or unpleasant, just as it is, without clinging or rejecting. And of course, the present moment isn't always pleasant. So learning to sit in the unpleasant moments invites us to practice compassion. And it took me a long time to realize that compassion and empathy are two different things. We can be empathetic with someone without being compassionate. Empathy implies that I kind of feel what you feel. I get what you're going through in some way. But often when we have empathy, we also want to fix it, right? It's unpleasant. Oh, you're sad. I don't want you to be sad. I want to fix you. I want to make it better. I want to comfort you. And in many situations, that denies the other person's experience or minimizes it. Or it's like, okay, now I have to change how I'm feeling because it's not going to work in this relating. So compassion allows us, by being completely present to what is and honoring another person's experience, honoring my experience, being fully present. We surrender control of the outcome in order to be fully present. And when we do that with great love, we have compassion. I learned so much about compassion when our son was dying. And this is a photo of us around Brandon's bed at the hospice. Our daughter, Brianna, her partner, Sean, and my husband, Brad. He was in a coma for 20 days before he died. And it was such an amazing outpouring of compassion because, of course, nobody could come and make anything better. Nobody could come and fix this. Nobody could come and change what was happening. But they could come and sit with us, which wasn't always very pleasant. You know, it wasn't a place to come and feel good, even though there was laughter at times around his bed, you know, as we recalled stories. And but it was just really this phenomenal experience where people showed up without any expectation, just to be present to what was really happening in the room. And of course, it led to some really profound, meaningful moments of love and depth and soulfulness and presence that would take a whole nother presentation to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think in this time when any kind of contact is so precious, being able to show up and just hear where somebody is, even though I can't fix it, I can't make it better, I can't get the quarantine to end. How can I just show up and be with you in the fact that this all really hurts right now? This is all really difficult. This is all exhausting and lonely. And can I just let that be shared with me? And can I share mine? and accept that this is something we can't fix right now, but we can just be together in it. And I think that kind of practice is becoming very important in a time like this. And I think it's part of what was so evident, like in the balconies of Italy, you know, with people sharing music. It's like we can't make this better, but we can show up to each other. Or when we were howling in our backyard, our neighborhood did pretty well for a while, howling at 8 o'clock. And again, it was like, we were just being present to each other. We can't fix this, we can't make it better. But we want to know everyone that we're here, we're together in this.
Yeah.
This last little piece is about practice. Of course, being married to a musician, as well as a pastor, I learned very early on, he said, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And we're learning more and more about this from neuroscience, that the neurons that fire together wire together, which is why our patterns and habituated ways of being in relationship and doing things can get us into such trouble because they're just practiced way too much. But it's difficult to create new practices and stick with them and cultivate them. So I tried to think about some very specific ones that we could look at. The first one is to cultivate beginner's mind, because this, of course, has thrown us off the deep end of having to learn new technology, figure out all this Zoom stuff and Facebook and stuff I didn't know my phone was supposed to be able to do, and how to do homeschooling with online school, how to do food delivery. Just, it's endless, right? How we figure out getting to our doctors if we need that, or the dentist, or just the list is on, you know, we went off the deep end. So this idea of cultivating beginner's mind. So I'm encouraging some of my clients to actually keep some little slips of paper around and have some jars to write some things, or, you know, containers they can put little strips of paper in. And the first one is about what it is we're learning. What have I learned during this time of quarantine? And some of my clients have been quite surprised at how full this jar is getting. And I mean, some of them are doing stuff like learning new languages, and some of them are learning gardening. Some of them are learning to have an entirely new relationship with family members. So this thing of staying open, I can learn something new. We've heard about the plasticity of the brain, that we can learn new things, we can keep growing, and we can be transformed in this crucible of experience. I imagine there's a few things on your list, Morgan, already.
Oh, for sure, for sure. As well as just, I mean, we have a 5-month-old. On Monday, he'll be 5 months. And so between that and working from home and doing digital pastoring, nothing is familiar. Like, there's not an anchor of familiarity. And while part of that for us is having a 5-month-old, everybody, I think, feels that in their own context. And so being able to really have to recheck in. I was thinking to one of your pieces earlier, Rita, where expressing your needs. Well, as a new mom with a wonderful partner, I was like, okay, this is what I need from you. And then the next week I'd be like, that's not working anymore because he's changed, our kid's changed, right? Like, developmentally, he's already at a different place. And so what it's taught us is that we have to check in, not just weekly, but sometimes daily. Like, hey, is this plan still good for today? If not, do we need to adjust? And taking that to work and understanding, okay, like, I'm used to being able to go in the office. I'm used to be able to have very clear boundaries around where my mind is going to work in what capacity, and having all that blur. So I work out in the living room and watch Julian throughout the day. And so my office is our living room, and trying to navigate the fact that I don't have separate spaces. reminded me of when I was in college and they were like, make sure you never work in your bed, like never do homework, let bed be where you sleep and you do homework elsewhere. And I was just thinking, as schools are potentially being delayed, or some families are choosing to do the hybrid where they're at home and on site, and some just going straight to online learning, or maybe homeschooling for the first time, figuring out how to even make your space new and adjusting is also really significant, because again, boundaries look so different if we're all now home working and educating, and how do we create space of decompression? And so it may not just be the technology we're learning, it's the space that once gave us great joy now needs to constantly be shifting. And so it really is, there's so much that we're having to learn and cultivate new. So this is a great example. I love the jar image as well.
The whole thing about reworking how we work in our spaces, and where family life and personal life and work life are all pushed into each other, and how to get creative about that, I think has become a really important place of learning, because there aren't the normal transition points of like driving in my car or transitioning from one thing to another. And I know some families have gotten really creative, especially when they live in apartments, which is the case for most of the urban world. You know, how do they make the most of finding privacy, or doing work, or and I know there's some fun flexibility. I think people have become less rigid about, oh no, there's a child showing up in my Zoom call, and or the cat or the dog, or you know, something else suddenly needs my attention. And I think there's some beautiful grace in all of that, you know, that people have been giving each other as we've tried to navigate an entirely new sea of stuff coming at us. And we've built more forts in the last 5 months to create space. I'm in my fort, you can't come in. There are a few times I've thrown blankets over things because I'm not going to do that now. That's not, I'm not going to notice the work that's unfinished. You know, just all of those things. And I think it's been brilliant how families are finding ways to give each other grace and experiment to find what's going to work for our family, what's going to work for our kids, what's going to work if I live alone and I'm navigating this. So yeah, it's so this whole like, I need a beginner's mind. I try to tell myself that every morning. What am I going to learn today? How can I keep myself open to something new, some new experience? And that's been really helpful. You know, even if it's an experience inside my own house that is so familiar. There's a poet, I think his name is Herman. He says, I know my wife so well, I don't know her at all. And we all have that problem of things becoming so familiar, we quit seeing them, even other people. We quit hearing them because, oh, I know that person, I already know what they're going to say. So I think that one of the invitations of quarantine is kind of turn that all on its head. It's like, oh, who are you? Who is this now? What is this happening? And I want to keep that cultivated and open. Some from Calvary who went to the Republic of Georgia will recognize this guy. This is Malchaz, the pastor of Peace Cathedral in Tbilisi. So he's one of my great encouragers of keeping a beginner's mind, cultivating a beginner's mind. This one is also easy to have a container for, which is gratitude. To write down, and my daughter and a couple of her friends have made this commitment to do it straight for 3 months every day, to write down 2 or 3 things they're grateful for, be specific, and try not to duplicate. So at the end of 3 months, that's, even if they do 1 a day, that's 90 things of gratitude, 90 pieces of gratitude. And I know a lot of folks have become extremely aware of how much we have in our country. And that even if I'm alone, I have ways of getting food. I have ways of, you know, being connected through phone and computer and television. And normally we take these things for granted. And I know for me, the quarantine has caused me to be really grateful for my shelter, for my job. So it's a very obvious but good one to be reminded of. Another one that's been big during this time is grieving. And again, this needs to have its own container, I think. Everything we've had to let go of. As most people out there know, my husband, Brad, leads pilgrimages in Europe and the Republic of Georgia. And of course, every single travel has been completely taken out of the calendar this year. And most of it's in the process of getting scheduled into next year. But it's so sad. I mean, every time I have to delete something out of my calendar, oh, I was supposed to be here today. Oh, I was going to be seeing this friend today. Oh, this was supposed to be happening. Oh, it's this person's birthday. Oh, my friend just died and I can't be with them. My friend's getting married and I can't be there. I mean, we've been inundated also with this awareness of loss, things we've had to let go of, plans we had made. So there again, I think it's helpful to make a list, just in part to be honest with myself. So I'm not pretending that this doesn't hurt. I'm not pushing it down and keeping a happy face on all the time, because the truth is this is real. These things are happening. This is real. Friends who are sick, friends who have passed away. You know, Calvary's had several deaths during this time, and not being willing to be with people, you know, right before their death or during their death, not being willing to ritualize in a funeral or internment, or having to do it virtually, has made this very, very difficult. And I think one of the things I think about, of course, is when we all can really gather back together, whether it's because we've all gotten shots or whatever, what are we going to do to ritualize that? And I think one of the things we're going to need to ritualize is how much we've lost during this time. And, you know, whether it's to read some of these things or have a fire we can throw all our paper into or whatever it is. And whether it's things that are easy to let go or difficult to let go, there's just been a lot of it. And letting go of friends I thought would show up, letting go of financial resources I thought might show up. I'm sure you've been a part of some really deep water around this, Morgan.
Yeah, both collectively, you know, how do you pastor during these transitions when you can't share space? And thankfully Anne has been able to do a few internments socially distanced in the foot of the cross courtyard. And yet, while that's been meaningful, it's been still much smaller. And so even for the folks who've been grateful to have that, there's still this loss of, but others haven't been able to do the same. My uncle who died back in April, we still haven't had a service for him. And yet there's also the reality, like I looked at Ian the other day and I said, our kids' first holidays are gonna just be us, isn't it? And so I think as well as the known experiences, there's also the fact that we don't know, like you said, when this will end and when we will be able to gather together. And so there's this moment of almost trying to not prepare, because you can't really prepare, but bring it into potential reality of saying, man, we may miss this as well. Like our kids' first Thanksgiving or Christmas, which are big family gatherings for us, may look like the three of us. And that's okay, because we're being safe and we're doing what we need to do. And yet it's definitely, talking about expectation and reality, it is not at all how we expected his first year of life to be. And there's so many different caveats to that, right? We had friends get married and their siblings watch their first dance on Zoom. And it's just not what you thought. My best friend from high school got married and we weren't there. And that's just not what we thought. And so being able to name it doesn't mean that we're any less grateful for the ways we are able to engage or connect. And yet, how do we acknowledge saying goodbye, I think, is a really meaningful piece, because sometimes we just say, oh, this is really hard, and we acknowledge that we're grieving, but then we don't have something to have a touch point to remember that, oh, right, remember setting the fire, or maybe gathering together, or whatever it might be, that we can do ritual now, maybe on our own, and then circle back and do ritual together, both of which are really meaningful. So I appreciate the acknowledgement of needing ritual around this.
Yeah. One of my clients has filled her jar with a lot of goodbye letters, things she couldn't say goodbye in person. She put it in the form of a letter. And that's helpful, I know, for some people. But again, I think we won't have complete closure until we are fully back together. And I want to be able to show up with all of this and not just the good stuff. And it is interesting to think about this time as something we might look back on with nostalgia. It's like the good old days, right? Remember the good old days of quarantine when we ate every meal every evening together, and when we played this game, or when we got to know this about each other, or when we cleaned out all the closets and overwhelmed the garbage man, whatever it is, I think that's going to be lovely as well. And how do we hold both, both the hell of some of the things we've been through, and the heaven of many things we've been through and are going to continue to go through. There's an old Buddhist saying that when you hold hell in one hand and heaven in the other, then you can make a proper pot of tea.
I like that.
Holding both. And I think it's what stretches our souls. It's what makes us big soul people. I thought it might be helpful because there's a lot of anxiety and depression around this time to just take a few moments and do something mindful. This is a practice I do with many of my clients. Of course, we've come to really appreciate how much our breath and the way we breathe impacts our internal experience of ourselves. And of course, it has great impact on our sense of either being safe and relaxed, or unsafe and aroused towards fight, flee, and freeze. And our body is the oldest part of our intelligence. We have brain cells throughout our body. So when I change how I breathe, I'm giving my body information about being in a safe place. So if I intentionally breathe in certain ways, I can calm my entire nervous system. So if you join me for a moment, and just imagine that you have two wings attached back against your spinal cord between your shoulder blades. You have two long muscles there. And of course, they're magical. They can be any color, any size. And as you inhale, I want you to imagine that you're going to inflate those wings. So as you breathe in, the wings are going to lift and move out and stretch out behind you. You can just visualize them there. And then as you exhale, and we want our exhale to be 30% longer than our inhale. We slowly, slowly exhale, and the wings deflate and come back to neutral. And again, we inhale. And then slowly, slowly, for a longer period of time, we exhale as the wings relax. Maybe shake out a bit. Inhale, filling the belly and the back. And then slowly exhale. So if you joined me in doing that, take a moment and see what you notice. What did you notice, Morgan?
As I imagined the two long muscles, it was interesting. My back straightened, which is just a natural opening of self. But then also for me, I am not great at meditation if I don't have something to visualize. And so being able to have the visualization of the wings going up and coming back down, it wasn't distracting, right? It wasn't this visual that pulled me from that moment, but it actually drew me further into it. And it allowed for just a different level of presence as my breath started to calm my body down. And
it's one of my
just
favorite. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say it just allowed for that final breath to be one of gratitude.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite exercises. It was taught to me by one of my Gestalt teachers, and I've used it in all kinds of situations and have taught it, of course, now to hundreds of other people. Because sometimes our body thinks we're in an unsafe situation, even when I might be safe. So it might lift my anxiety, it might raise my heart rate, it might cause me to tense up in a way that gets in the way of my being present. So if I can remind myself I'm in a safe place, I'm wearing my mask, there isn't anyone too close to me, I can take a deep breath, I am safe. And because we can, I mean, there's so much fear in the media right now. So I think this is really a great practice to sort of notice, okay, for whatever reason, I'm not feeling very safe. My body's kind of tensing up. What can I do to help myself relax? How can I slow down my heart rate and come back into better contact with myself and with others? So this has been one of my favorite tools. There are others, but I think because of the visualization of the wings, it has a particular sweetness to it. This is just a review of some things I said earlier about not taking things personally. That when we have good boundaries, it helps us not to take things personally. It's actually one of my invisible tattoos. My clients will all tell you about invisible tattoos as a way of reminding ourselves in certain situations. That when we're working with somebody that's upset or a child that's distressed, I don't need to make it about me. Don't take it personally. This belongs to the other person. This belongs, their choice not to wear a mask belongs to them. Their choice to stand too close, or they're close to you know, whatever it is that I feel is being disregarded, I can come back and go, okay, I have boundaries. I know this isn't about me. This person's behavior isn't about me. I can take a deep breath and ground myself in my own safety, knowing I'm doing what I believe is going to keep me safe. I'm doing what I think is going to keep you safe. And I respect that.
Mm.
So I think that's a good thing to practice, particularly as things open up or close up, whichever direction we seem to be going. The other thing, we've been having a lot of fun with this actually, is how to create safe greetings. It's almost become like the secret handshake in 20,000 variations. And of course, we have some beautiful examples from in the wisdom of the East around like bowing or the hand gesture, which we use when we pray, and it's nice to be able to use it with other people. Use it for God, now we can use it with each other. Hand signals, hand gestures, and also what we communicate about being safe when we do wear a mask or a face shield, that I care about you and I don't want you to be sick. So again, I think this is one of the things that I think is going to continue even after COVID is open. We're going to hopefully be more intentional about how we show up when we can't touch each other, how we are going to be present when we can't touch each other. And there's so many other places where we're always going to need that kind of skill set. So I love that. And just to circle back around, last of all, about being intentional and building a support system of at least 4 or 5 people who you can call and go, hey, I've had a bad day and I need to talk to somebody. Is this a good time to talk? Do you have half an hour? Do you have 10 minutes? Whatever it is you want to ask for. And if they say, no, I'm sorry, this is not a good time, you have another person that I can call. I don't need to take it personally. It's not about me. And I have a big enough team. There's someone else I can call to share my day with. Because sometimes even our immediate family, sometimes the people in the house aren't available to hear us. So we need to be able to reach out and if nothing else fails, reach out by letter. And be intentional about knowing who your support system is. I love all the words that have come up around it too. Quarantine is the one you used, Morgan. I hadn't heard that before. We call ours the immunity pod. And I know some immunity pods are, like ours includes our 4-generation family that lived basically together. And a couple of friends who we do physically distant happy hour in the backyard. And other people have created immunity pods with their cul-de-sacs or with a neighbor. I know some people who are single have created an immunity pod with 2 or 3 other people who they trust are also observing safe practices. And it's tough. I mean, we do have to trust each other and take risks. We can't completely control everything other people are doing. So it's a bit of an act of faith, right? To say, I want to experience you in my space, and I'm going to trust that you're doing the best you can to keep me safe. And I'm going to, hopefully you can trust me to do my best in keeping you safe. So we also have learned to be really explicit with our little quarantine or immunity pod about those expectations. You know, we do expect that you will wear a mask anytime you're in public. We expect that you have good hand washing practices. I mean, even though it may sound kind of redundant that we're saying this, it's good to just clarify, because I know some people feel very differently and are not observing those practices. We expect you to use hand sanitizer. We expect you to use the disinfecting wipes that are in our bathroom. Any of those kinds of things. I think if we can just be clear and respect each other's needs, and again, this circles us back around to how can I be intentional and specific about my needs so that I can feel safe with you. It doesn't hurt, you know, and you can even all vote on it as a group. We've kind of, in the beginning with our 4-generation family, we sort of went through some experiments around not touching, bringing the mail in with a rubber glove and not touching it for 24 hours, setting it in the sun, or do we wipe off the groceries when they come in? Do we not? Do we? And of course, some of that has changed as we've learned more from the science around all of that. And so you can revisit it every once in a while. What do we think about masks today when we go to the grocery store? And I think it's just good to revisit that every once in a while with the people that are in your system and in your team. Do we not, I mean, one of the things in my building, because I'm seeing a few clients now physically distant in my office, is that I don't ride the elevator with anybody, you know, or I take the stairs. I have a mask on, but there's something about that for me. I feel safer if I don't share that enclosed space. I'm going to have windows open, whatever that is. And because I have allergies, people get freaked out when I cough. So I'm also thinking about a t-shirt that says I have allergies, or writing it on my mask. Excuse my coughing, I have allergies. But again, I think we have to sort of give each other grace and have some faith in each other that we're all doing our best to be healthy and keep each other healthy.
Yeah. I think one of the things that when Ian and I, because Julian's slowly getting to the age of separation anxiety, and for the first really 4 months of his life, he'd only been held by Ian and I. And so we had to figure out, like, do we expand to some of our cousins so that Julian at least can get familiar being held by others? Otherwise, that could be a really tough dynamic when we can re-engage with people. And it still might be, but I remember feeling incredibly nervous to invite, and it was an invitation. It wasn't an expectation. Like when we talked to our cousins who we expanded our quarantine to, we just said, do you feel like our practices are safe enough? Do we need to adjust any of our practices to where you would feel safe for us to be in shared space with each other? To where you can hold our kid and we feel safe that you're holding our kid, and that you might be able to help us every once in a while. And it was a really helpful practice also in consent, acknowledging that just because we invited somebody in doesn't mean they're consenting to how we practice. And that we get to say, this is, as you were saying, this is what we need to be able to trust you in our shared space. And so when we made the tough decision of allowing my parents to come visit in case there was another spike, and sure enough, the day they got home, there was a spike. So they beat it just in time so that they could see him. We also realized that meant quarantining ourselves for 2 weeks to honor the expectations of our cousins. And we didn't social distance with folks. We didn't do those types of things just to reduce our exposure. And sometimes that was like, oh, one risk for another. And yet that's where we're at, you know, whether it's big risks or little risks, we're figuring out how to honor each other's differences and what does that look like. And as you noted, some folks feel more comfortable than others with their risk level, and simply saying that's your choice and this is where I'm at, and navigating that. And so I think those are the helpful pieces that can come into play when we learn just to continue to check back in with each other. And as you said, don't take it personal, because I think when it comes to safety measures, it can feel incredibly personal. Because if we had a family member say, we don't really wear masks, but we want to see you, and we said no, because that's more than we're comfortable with, that can feel like we're quote unquote judging them, or vice versa, that they're judging us, versus being able to simply hold it open handed and say, that's where you're at. And if that works for you, okay, that doesn't work for me. And we'll continue to see each other over the phone or through technology. And that's okay, because this is what works for both of us. Or having the tough conversations.
Yeah, I think that mutual respect is so important. And we know this is all temporary. So I often like add, it doesn't work for us to do that now. And I love you. I want to stay in relationship. And when this is over, I'll look forward to reconnecting, or we'll look forward to creating that experience together. I put up this slide, which is a photo of the bridge that goes from San Diego to Coronado. Our family lived in San Diego for a few years, and this bridge is phenomenal and scary to me. It goes very, very high above the water because it's big enough to allow the naval battleships to go under the bridge. So that gives you an idea of how far above the water it is. And a friend of mine said, imagine having to cross that bridge with no guardrails. And I was like, no, I would not be doing that. Right? But it does have guardrails. It has these little safety measures that, because of that, I have no problem driving to Coronado Island. I love going over to Coronado Island. And it's just that little bit of structure. And it seems kind of surprising, right? It's not a huge structure on either side of the road, but it's just enough that I feel safe getting across. And so I think that thing about all these rules and structures about what we need to feel safe are important, because then it allows us to take the risks that we want to take in being with people and how we want to be with people. So the risks are supported by the structure. So being really explicit about that, I think, is really helpful. As you said, with family, that's something we're going to be negotiating, I think, for a while, and revisiting, as things change in the world. We've kind of had a big family row going with Europe, because Europe has, of course, said you're not welcome to come visit Europe. All the Americans are now quarantined away from Europe. Because they've done better bringing down their numbers than we have. And they're saying, and we love you and we want you back. So we hope this will be over soon. So those kinds of things, the balance between risk and the need for structures that help us know when and how we want to take those risks. The other thing I thought I would bring up, because you mentioned kids, one of the things that can be scary for kids are all the masks and the mask wearing. So we've done a lot of game playing with them and getting creative with them, because most kids are cool if you're doing this with dress up. And there's some crazy looking masks out there these days. So to just play with kids so that they get comfortable with them, they get comfortable seeing their family members in masks, we get comfortable smiling with our eyes. Families like ours who've had a lot of medical experience forget sometimes what it was like when we first started wearing them. It's kind of interesting because now we're like, oh, we did this for a long time. This is easy. But I know for other people it isn't. To get in the routine, to get in the habit, always make sure you have one with you or you have backups or whatever. But it can really be a playful, wonderful thing, to be creative with, especially with kids. For our kids, we even pulled out Halloween stuff, and so they get comfortable with seeing the world, showing up in very, very different ways for all of us. So yeah, with your little one, it's going to be a new journey of beginning and then transition into the larger public sphere.
Yeah. Yeah. We joke that he won't really know that people don't always wear masks or they're not always on screen, because that's how he sees people right now, outside of us.
So
And
seeing them without a mask, a crowd of people without
hmm
masks might be scary for
hmm
the first
right.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's like,
so
what? Look at all those mouths coming
that's
at me.
right. They move. That's true.
Yeah.
Um, but it is, right. And to your point around, masks make it hard when you're out in public to know how other people are receiving or responding. And because you can't smile. I remember I don't go, Ian usually does our grocery shopping, so we minimize how much exposure we even have in our own house. Um, but I was out one day somewhere and had a mask on, and I wanted to let the person know, like, oh, like, hi, I see you, it's, we're good. And I was smiling under my mask, and I was like, they can't see that. They
Yep.
they might be able to see it. And I was wearing sunglasses, but they couldn't see it because I had sunglasses. Like, they couldn't engage that nonverbal. And so it's like you said, having that beginner's mind of how do we engage, how do we honor, and how do we acknowledge also when we don't have the same reserve that we would at other times to handle stress or having to pivot. I know with my grad students, I've been teaching online on Wednesdays. Our class is a practice class for social work. So it's designed to require you to pivot pretty frequently because we're teaching you how to put it in practice. And one of the things I've noticed is my students just don't have the reserve because they're having to pivot so much in every other aspect of their life, that our course is just like above and beyond. And it's taught me how to have to pivot and say, okay, how do we meet each other in a way where you're still getting the education you need and you're still becoming a good practitioner, while acknowledging we're in a space where there's not as much nimbleness because maybe that nimbleness was already used that day.
Yeah.
And I think when we come back together in any capacity, whether it's, on site, but we're still socially distanced apart, or when we come back, but maybe there's still some safety measures in place.
Mhm.
I think being in such familiar spaces like a church, it can be incredibly difficult because we just want it to feel warm and nurturing. And some of these safety measures, as you noted, can feel distant. And so we're already experiencing that distance. And so when we want to get together and it still isn't what we thought, being able to have, and just naming, I think for me and my personality, we're all very different. But I know for me, your husband works with our staff on Enneagram staff. So I am a 2 on the Enneagram, which means I have a repressed thinking center. And all that means is I overthink things in an unproductive manner, right? So this time has been a lot of unproductive thinking because I have time to do it, as well as being a new parent and a pandemic.
Yeah.
And what I realized for me was simply naming, like, this is hard. I'm in a space where I don't have the energy. So when you were talking about being specific of what you need from somebody else, sometimes I don't know what I need, but if I name, like, this didn't align for me today, I will work to figure out what might align. That has allowed Ian and I to really continue, as you noted, not taking it personally, right?
Yes. Well, and that willingness to get the do-overs. That was a
Mm-hmm.
great experiment. I think we need to change it in this way. I think we need to try it this way next time. Because
Mm-hmm.
that's how we learn. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the gathering coming up at Calvary in the parking lot is going to be this big experiment. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure stuff will happen that will be
Mm-hmm.
unpleasant, and some other things will be very wonderful and very pleasant. And
Yeah.
allowing there to be enough grace and space for all that might arise
Mm-hmm.
is going to be really awesome and amazing. And then the next experiment will be created based on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so I
Mm-hmm.
think that whole thing of being flexible, willing to pivot, willing to try again when something isn't working
Mm-hmm.
quite right,
Mm-hmm.
willing to learn. And of course, the more people we negotiate and experiment with, the more challenging that is.
Mm-hmm.
And then to respect each other's ability to give up what we can at any given moment, because everyone has a limited bandwidth.
Yeah.
I need to be able to be honest and go, express what I need, be specific, tell you how much time I need, and then I'll get back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can walk away and still feel safe and good about our
Yeah.
time together.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I've really appreciated this time together.
Well, I have as well. And I am just so grateful because sometimes we know we need to be able to explore things in uncertain times, but we don't always have a starting point or a conversation space to engage and say we need to look at this, or to acknowledge, hey, I know I previously said I was okay with it, but I'm no longer okay with it, and I need to be able to know how to do that. And so I just appreciate your illustrations, your resources, and also just your personal examples of figuring out how to hold things in such a way that we can make it through this together, but also maintain connection with self and other during and post COVID safety measures, because it won't last forever. And we want to be as mindful of how do we navigate these relationships so that we can connect again in what iteration of connection it is, knowing that it won't be this difficult in this expression of difficultness, or difficulty rather. I think difficultness is a new word, but difficulty.
It still works for me.
But being able to acknowledge, like, this may not work right now, but we can hopefully see each other through until it can.
Yeah.
So I just appreciate your time and just your wisdom, Rita.
I actually have a very unrealistic big hope that we will actually be much more skillful in our relationships when this is over, because of our forced time together and our forced
Mm-hmm.
exploration of these issues. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the things I hope is that this time actually transforms for us, and that we really do build a new normal of relating to each other that's more skillful and more meaningful and more contactful. So yeah, I'm all in the mess with all of us stirring the pot. So
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing what the future brings, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Rita. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to add at this point that I hope you'll edit this as heavily as you need to.